Hey everyone, what's going on? Today in the mainstream media, one of the major stories was that Donald Trump and Kim Jong Un are going to be meeting for a second time sometime toward the end of February. And what's really interesting is just the other day on January 8th, when Donald Trump addressed the nation about building the wall, I made this video about the mainstream media just below the story of Donald Trump. They had a story of the wrestler Chris Jericho signing with a new wrestling league called the All Elite Wrestling League. And just think about it. Donald Trump is addressing the nation about the wall, and right below it, we got a story about Chris Jericho. Think about it in biblical terms, the walls of Jericho. And when you look this guy up, you find out that his birthday just so happens to be November 9th, which is in 2016, the day that we were told that Donald Trump was elected to be the president, which just so happened to be the anniversary of the announcement of the Berlin Wall coming down in 1989. Also, this guy is 48 years old, and in gematria, which is the practice of coding numbers into words and phrases that stems back to Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism that has a belief that God created the world by merging the letter with the number. In this ancient knowledge system, if you write out the word wall, wall equals 48. That's why it's significant. Chris Jericho was 48 years old. Also, Donald Trump equals 48. And, you know, he won the election just after the Cleveland Indians were in the World Series, and Cleveland hadn't won since the year 1948. In gematria, Cleveland equals 48. Mike Pence became the 48th vice president. The Mexican-American War came to an end in the year 1848. Donald Trump also won, and it was considered the biggest election upset since the year 1948, when Harry S. Truman upset Thomas E. Dewey. And look at Harry S. Truman in gematria here. Harry S. Truman, 148, 176. Now look at Donald J. Trump, 148, 176. There's more to explain with the number 48 and this day when Donald Trump won the election. But think about Harry S. Truman. Harry S. Truman. Harry S. Truman was the president for the majority of the Korean War. And what I said in this previous video was that it was interesting that Donald Trump gave this address to the nation about building the wall on January 8th, which just so happens to be Kim Jong Un's birthday. I'll show you really quick. Kim Jong Un, January 8th is his birthday. The reason that all of this is important to North Korea is because if you look at North Korea, you find out that North Korea, they actually became the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea, in the year 1948. Unbelievable, huh? 9/9 of 1948. Also in gematria, the practice of coding numbers and words, look at Kim Jong Un. Kim Jong Un, 48 in gematria. And, think about how we're told that Russia was, meddling with the election. It's all just a big joke, right? But they were told about Russia that equals 48 in gematria. And think about all of this in regards to World War. World War equals 48 in gematria. Another thing that came out of World War II was that Israel, the Jews, whatever you want to call them, the false Jews, they regained the Holy Land, right? That's what they got out of World War II. And Israel declared its independence in none other than 1948. And they were also recognized by Harry S. Truman before he became the president. And think about that in regards to Kabbalah. Kabbalah is Jewish mysticism, and within it, they practice gematria, the practice of coding numbers into words and phrases. all of these things are by the numbers. And if you look into the Jews, you find out that they identify with the moon. And hopefully I'm not losing you here, but the Jews identify with the moon. That's why all of their festivals begin at sunset, because the day actually begins at night, according to them. And, they do all these things that are associated with the moon. The moon, it goes away and then it almost dies and then it comes back, just like the Jews. So they identify with the moon, supposedly. And what's interesting about that is right after Donald Trump won the election in 2016, we got the closest supermoon since none other than the year 1948. The reason that I'm bringing all of this up is because we're getting this story about Trump and Kim and how they're going to have a second meeting just days before we're going to get this newest total lunar eclipse. There's a total lunar eclipse, a blood moon, that is coming up on January 20th at nighttime, 20th and 21st, depending on where you live, right? So this story comes just before we get this super wolf blood moon. And the reason that sticks out so much in regards to North Korea is that the last time that we had a blood moon, it just so happened to fall on the anniversary of the Korean War coming to an end. What else is interesting about this is that the Korean War came to an end on the 208th day of the year, and when Donald Trump addressed the nation about building the wall, it just so happened to be 208 days after his birthday. All of these stories that we get in the media, all these things that happen throughout history that we're told, at least, every single day our media is coated with this system, and it's all based on this ancient knowledge about, the stars and astrology and this practice of coding numbers into words. There's also something called Hermeticism, which has a belief that, everything has a vibration, letters, numbers, signs, and symbols, which is why when they put certain stories in front of us in the mainstream media, it can somehow manipulate the way that this world works. And there's people, or, people who understand this knowledge, and there's something that is using this knowledge to rule over the masses and keep us in control. And that's what I talk about a lot on this channel. That there is a code that we all live in, but there are people who understand this code and they're using it to, control the rest of us, control the mass population. And one of the groups that I'm talking about that understands this knowledge and have been using it to rule over the masses are the Jesuits. And you can look up the Jesuits. They're also called the Society of Jesus. And Pope Francis, the current pope, is supposedly the first ever Jesuit pope. And if you look up Pope Francis, you can find pictures before he was the pope where he's doing this Freemasonic hidden hand pose. And if you're a Catholic, you're supposedly not supposed to be able to be a Freemason. So why is Pope Francis doing the Masonic hidden hand pose when he's the leader of the Catholic Church? But if you're Catholic, you're not supposed to be a Freemason. It's all intertwined. And I'm going to explain that here in just 1 second. And it probably goes back farther than King Henry VIII, but King Henry VIII is where it's really noticeable that these two groups are truly just one and the same. The reason, though, that I bring up all of this about Pope Francis is because if you remember when Pope Francis visited the United States in 2015, the big deal was all about that blood moon tetrad. There was the 4 blood moons in a short amount of time where they all fell on Jewish festival days, right? There were 4 blood moons. The last blood moon of that tetrad happened on September 28th of 2015, which was the day after Pope Francis had left the United States. He left the United States at the nighttime on 9/27. Later that night, we got the fourth blood moon of the Tetrad. And September 27th, the day that he left, just so happens to be the Jesuit anniversary. The anniversary of the Jesuits being founded, or the Society of Jesus being founded. He's supposedly the first ever Jesuit Pope. So let's go look at some of the stuff I documented about with the Jesuits and how it's connected to North Korea. And I'll leave some video links in the description. I covered it a lot more extensively in a lot of these other videos. I've talked about a lot of stuff. Even Hawaii, how we had the North Korean missile scare at Hawaii. And then, by the numbers, we also got that volcano eruption. And it was all connected to the Great American Eclipse that happened on August 21st of 2017. That eclipse just so happened to fall on the anniversary of Hawaii becoming a state. It was the 59th anniversary of Hawaii becoming a state. And think about Hawaii in regards to World War. Let's just look at one thing in gematria again, just to show you that how significant gematria truly is. World War also equals 114, just like Pearl Harbor equals 114, just like Holocaust equals 114. And, to put it in perspective, look at Kim Jong Un again. Kim Jong Un, 114. Another interesting thing about their first meeting with Donald Trump, too, it was on June 12th, 6/12. The reason that sticks out so much is because if you read out World War, there's another form of gematria called Sumerian gematria, where you multiply the alphabetic order by 6, and in the reverse, World War equals 612, just like the day that they met. But like I said, I'll leave a bunch of other links in the description so you can understand more. But Hawaii even, the last time that there was a total solar eclipse before the Great American Eclipse that was visible, it was only visible in Hawaii in the year 1991, which was the same year the Cold War came to an end. And think about, space and moon and Cold War and Russia. Remember, Russia equals 48. And that was all in the year 91. The word rockets equal 91. Space equals 91. Apollo equals 91. The list goes on, So there's definitely something significant about this upcoming moon and how it coincides with what is going on. And it's interrelated into Pope Francis, the leader of the Jesuits, if you will, I guess. The leader of the Catholic Church, but the first Jesuit Pope is what I'm getting at. Anyway, if you go from the story that we got today about the second meeting with Donald Trump and Kim Jong Un, and you measure from the day that they actually did meet the first time, it is 220 days after this. So they met 220 days ago, and now we're getting a story they're going to meet again. And the reason this sticks out so much is because if you write out Donald John Trump in gematria, Donald John Trump equals 220. And if you noticed, it was also 7 months and 6 days. 220 days, 7 months and 6 days. They both sync up with Donald Trump. And the reason that's so interesting is because the Jesuits just so happen to be founded when the 220th Pope was the Pope. And Pope Francis's birthday just so happens to be 2 months and 20 days after the Jesuit anniversary. And Kim Jong-un's father just so happened to die on Pope Francis's birthday in 2011. So that means Kim Jong-un became the leader of Korea on Pope Francis's birthday. Donald Trump also went to Fordham University, which just so happens to be a Jesuit university. And in gematria, if you write out what they're really called, Society of Jesus, it just so happens to equal 187. And Donald Trump and Pope Francis's birthdays are 187 days apart. And if you remember, just before Donald Trump won the election, we had LeBron James, also known as King James, make the ultimate comeback, and he won the NBA Finals on the real King James's birthday. And then Donald Trump had his national convention in Cleveland, right? Remember, Cleveland equals 48. Then the Indians went on to the World Series. But his national convention began on 18/7, July 18th, and it was 187 days before he became the president. Remember, too, LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers also visited the White House just after Donald Trump won the election, and they visited the White House the same day Donald Trump visited the White House. And then they came out with a game show called The Wall that was starring LeBron James. What are the odds of that? Think about all the pre-production they had to do for all this, and then it just so happens to come out just after Donald Trump wins on the anniversary of the Berlin Wall coming down. They come out with a movie called The Wall, and it was some army movie just after that. They came out with another movie called The Great Wall. I think it had Matt Damon in it. That came out on the 48th day of the year even. Like, what are the odds? But anyway, in regards to 187, the Freemason headquarters just so happens to be in Washington, D.C., and outside of their headquarters, they have 33 foot tall pillars. There's 33 foot tall pillars, because they operate by this code. And what Freemasonry is actually called, or at least Scottish Rite, is called Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, that equals 187. And Washington, D.C. equals 187. And think about George Washington, who was a 33rd degree Freemason. His name equals 187. And a lot of it stems back to the Torah that has 187 chapters. Once again, it goes back to Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, right? So, just wanted to point that out really quick. Let's go back to this story here. Another reason that this 220 number then is important, and hopefully I'm not losing you, but this story comes 220 days, let's just go back, 220 days after their first meeting. Donald John Trump equals 220. The Jesuits were founded with the 220th Pope. That same Pope just so happened to be the one who fully excommunicated King Henry VIII. And if you remember, King Henry VIII supposedly, broke away from the Catholic Church because his wife Catherine of Aragon couldn't have kids. And, he wanted to get a divorce and so on. That's why he had so many wives. His first wife, though, was Catherine of Aragon, who was the daughter of Isabel of Castile, who was the person who funded Christopher Columbus to supposedly come and discover America, even though there was already people here. And his name is actually Cristobal Colon, that equals 220. And he also died 220 days after, I believe it was after the day that he discovered America on October 12th, supposedly. And just think about how, his wife was a big Catholic and whatever else. And let's look at the gematria of that really quick while we're here, just to prove, once again, gematria. So his wife's name was Catherine of Aragon, that equals 160. And her mother, who funded Christopher Columbus, was named Isabella I of Castile, that equals 160. And look at King Henry VIII. Henry VIII. 160. What are the odds that all three of them equal the same thing? Notice King Henry VIII also equals 191. Just like Society of Jesus, that equals 191. The odds. The Queen right now, Elizabeth II, 191. There's a billion other things that I've previously talked about, but these two groups they want you to think they're different. They're one and the same, They're both running the same agenda. They're both, they're in bed together. People want to think they're different. They're not any different. They're just two different groups that, have the same knowledge. Another 187 is that Kim Jong Un, according to the Swiss, his birthday just so happens to be on 7/5. And if you go from 7/5 to the day we're now told that his birthday is, January 8th, it's 187 days. And 7/5 is also 84 days before the Jesuit anniversary, and the word Jesuit just so happens to equal 84, just like United States of America, tons of other things that are important to 84. Another reason that I know that Kim Jong Un is connected to the Jesuits is because his birthday is 3 months and 12 days after the Jesuit anniversary, and Pope Francis's full name, Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Gematria, equals 312, and the word Pope equals 312. And, some of the founders of the Jesuits, Francis Xavier, who Pope Francis is probably named after, not Francis of Assisi, but Francis Xavier, he died on December 3rd, which can be written as 3/12, and Ignatius of Loyola was made a saint on 3/12, 312, right? And if you look up the Korean War lasted for 3 years, 1 month, and 2 days, 312. The reason that I bring all that up is because, remember, Dennis Rodman is a big, friend with Kim Jong Un and whatever. Then they released the guy named Otto Warmbier, who then later died and whatnot. Otto Warmbier was supposedly released at 2:20 at night, or 2:20 in the afternoon, 220, right? And if you remember, Dennis Rodman wore that shirt or that sweater, whatever it was, and it was all about, he was advertising pot coin that equals 312. And just think about that story too. The kid's name that got released, his name was Otto Warmbier, and Dennis Rodman in basketball, his nickname is the Worm. And then he's the reason that Otto Warmbier gets released. I mean, come on. It's a joke. And then we had John McCain all mad about Otto Warmbier and blaming North Korea for Otto Warmbier dying, right? And the interesting thing about that is that around that same time, we also got that USS Fitzgerald crash that was in the ocean by Japan, towards Korea. And it supposedly crashed at 2:20 a.m. And then later that year, on the same day as the Great American Eclipse, we got the USS John McCain, who also crashed. And the reason that sticks out so much is because John McCain was on the USS Enterprise when he was in the military. And on February 20th, 2:20, that was the day that John Glenn, the astronaut, was picked up from Friendship 7, and the USS Enterprise that John McCain was on was used as a tracking device for Friendship 7. So there's definitely a connection to this 220. Then we get John McCain dying, and then we also had George H.W. Bush dying. And George H.W. Bush's birthday just so happens to be the same day that Donald Trump and Kim Jong Un met, on June 12th. What are the odds? Also, the reason for this meeting today was because of the North Korean guy named Kim Yong-chol. And he met the first time and the second time with Michael Pompeo. That equals 220. And if you go back and look, Michael Pompeo, he replaced Rex Wayne Tillerson because he got fired, right? Rex Wayne Tillerson equals 220. And he was fired on the anniversary of Pope Francis becoming the Pope. Also, in 2018 in February, on February 25th, we got a story about the Mexican president calling off his trip to the White House. And it was because he was mad about Donald Trump's phone call on February 20th, 220. And that story came 220 days after the Mexican president's birthday. And his birthday just so happened to be the anniversary of the Eagle landing on the moon, right? The original moon landing in the year 69. If you're at Mexican border, it equals 220. Another interesting thing is this story comes out just after Donald Trump is talking about the new missile defense and whatnot. And the reason that sticks out so much, it's the new space missile defense, which is interesting. But remember in 2018 in March, on March 1st, we got the story about how Russia was going to bomb Florida. They had a missile that could reach Florida. And the reason that was so interesting, that story came 220 days before Vladimir Putin's birthday. And Vladimir Putin and Francis Bacon gematria equals 220. The one where you use capital letters. So there's definitely some stuff going on. The Mexican president, the new one, his birthday is the day that leaves 48 days in the year. And notice he was born in the same year that the Korean War came to an end, 1953. It's interesting too, if you just write out war games equals 48. It's all interesting that it equals, you know, this too, 1,114 in Jewish, because that closest supermoon just after Donald Trump won was on this date. And that's also Prince Charles's birthday. And Prince Charles was born in the year 1948. And, was it King Charles? He died at the age of 48. King Charles I. Charles II in gematria equals 48. The word Freemason also equals 48 in gematria. Illuminati equals 48 in gematria. One other thing that sticks out to me is that recently I've talked a lot about Michael Jordan and the NBA All-Star Week. The All-Star game is going to be on Michael Jordan's birthday this year, which is the 48th day of the year. And if you ever see the movie National Treasure, they talk about how the secret lies with Charlotte, and it's actually because of a real guy named Charles Carroll III, Charles Carroll III, and he died on November 14th as well. And I guess I only bring that up because this moon that is coming up in a few days, it's also called a wolf moon. And if you watch some of my previous videos or come to my blog, there's something very special about the movie Teen Wolf and how it syncs up to the NBA and a bunch of other things that are going on. That's why we have the Chiefs and the Rams that are possibly going to be, possibly could be in the Super Bowl. It's synced up to what I was talking about in 2015 in regards to the wolf symbolism. And we have this wolf moon that is coming up. The wolf moon it's the wolf red moon, right? The blood moon, it even comes on the same time that the Chiefs are playing the Patriots in the championship game here, right? Think about the Chiefs. They're the Sea of Red. They're all about red. Their mascot is Casey Wolf, so it's definitely significant to what I'm talking about. This moon's coming up on that same day. Tom Brady was really synced up to Lupercalia, though, which is the festival of celebrating and sacrificing the wolf. Maybe I'll make another video on that, but, Lupercalia, Tom Brady equals 98, Lupercalia equals 98. Oh, man. What is it? New England Patriots equal 98, I think. New England Patriots. Tom Brady played for the Michigan Wolverines. They equal 98. Right? Wolf. Think about it. I know a Wolverine isn't a wolf, but just think about the word wolf just within it. Also, that one year we had the Snickers commercial during the Super Bowl with Steve Buscemi and whatnot. Snickers. And it was a Brady Bunch commercial. Brady Bunch 98. Go on forever. That was before Super Bowl 49, and earlier in that year, we got the death of Alice from the Brady Bunch, and it was right around the same time that Dr. Dre bought the Giselle and Bundchen and Tom Brady house, the Brady Bunchen house, and then Alice from the Brady Bunch dies just before Super Bowl 49. Dr. Dre equaled 49. He was 49 years old. Oh, the odds. So we'll leave it at that. I feel like I missed some stuff. Oh, yeah. The South Korean leader, his name is Moon-Jesuits-WWIII, too. Moon. What are the odds? His name is Moon. So definitely important. So have a good one. Try to figure out this puzzle, but there's definitely a puzzle with this wall symbolism and how it syncs up to North Korea, World War. Donald Trump visited the Western Wall when he first became the Pope, and then he met, or when he first became the president, and then he met the Pope, and it was all synced up to 10 days before, stuff that I talked about with JFK. Donald Trump met Pope Francis on the 144th day of the year. JFK was assassinated 144 days after meeting the Pope. I'll leave a link in the description. There's a ton of stuff. I don't want to keep rambling on here, but it's interesting because today is 10 days after Kim Jong Un's birthday and 10 days after Donald Trump addressed the nation about building the wall. So just check out some links in the description. I know there's a lot to it, but have a good one. Peace.